Okay, everybody, welcome to the March meeting of the Camera Club of Richmond. I'm Martin Evans, and we're happy that everyone can make it. It's a gorgeous day here for those of you who are in some other place, but it's been gorgeous today. Yeah, last go round, if you haven't seen Jamie Hayes' video of the last evaluation, it's wonderful. And we express our thanks to him for that intervention. New members, Linda and Kurt is on here as that, and we've got Celie and Dennis who are here, and their guests, and welcome. We hope you join. We'll do a dance and make sure they. For those of you who have not paid, a reminder always, the dues are due. There's a link on the CCR homepage, just a reminder. Sometimes you think you've done it, but forgot. So just check and make sure that you've done it. We still have a few that are outstanding. And Kemp is online, and we would, it's not too late to play, June 9th with Anthony Rumley, assigned subject shadows. And I'm sure that everyone has a lot of those. And when you go back and look at your images, you can use some that you thought might have not been very good, but turned out to be better than you think. Look at all those shadows. Michael is here. Any comment, Michael? Nope, just as stated. Thank you. Jane is here and brings up the April 14th meeting with Anne, and the topic is restoring old photos. And the May 12th, Wild Things Far and Near with Rob Sabatini. And as you can see, the shadows on the June 9th and the multiple exposure thing on August 11th. Any other comment, Jane?
For those people who didn't see the December with Laura Twining, you can go online and see that, and it talks about multiple exposures and really gets you going. I don't have anything for shadows, so if anybody has anything they want to share with us, I'd appreciate it.
Just look back in your old images, and I think slides, you heard that? Old images, and you'll find some that have shadows that may be usable. Exhibits, Pat had reminders of Covenant Woods, which is now showing. The Cultural Arts Center at Glen Allen, mid-July through September 8th. Public Library in August, and VCU Health in November and December. And just be aware of these, because it seems like we get right to the deadline and then have to scurry around and remind everybody, and then a big influx comes. So be forewarned. You got an opportunity to submit a bunch of images and maybe get them sold. Karen is somewhere. Yep. Any comment, Karen? All here. Spotlight video. And Terry? I showed those to a person who was the president of the one of the camera clubs in South Florida. And she was commenting on our images versus her images. And they only do, in this particular club, it only exists in the winter months because of the snowbird phenomenon. Nobody's there in the summer. So she was commenting on how good our images are. It was sort of nice to see somebody else from another camera club saying that the images are really pretty good. She was astounded. She just kept going on and on. I did see some, and we're better. I mean, their images were good, but, and, you know, you don't want to just say, oh, ours are much better, but it was pretty obvious that at least, there were some that were very, very good, but a lot of them looked very snapshotish. And I don't know how you have a camera club that only exists for 6 months because you sort of lose the whole rhythm, but that's what they do. Venice is where it is, Florida. Jerry, I don't know if he's online, but and Carol Hageman and past president Harold Luna, we are grateful to their things. Nick is online somewhere in the.
I'm here.
Great. Nic Stover, we've had here before on multiple occasions, and I think we're one of the few camera clubs that he participates with and is able to judge.
You're the only one I do image evaluation for. So you can thank or blame Karen. So either way, Karen Davis is responsible for that one way or another. So.
Well, we're very, very grateful, and we look forward to your evaluations every year. And I listed some things about you that are online and so forth. I guess the most interesting thing to me is number 4, turned professional photographer in 2020. All of us think that people with your level of skills have been doing it since they were 3. But just the fact that you changed your whole rhythm and signed up to be a committed photographer as recently as 2020 is great. There is hope for some of us.
Yeah, I didn't pick up a camera till late 2016. So give him more inspiration. Many of you have been photographing much, much longer than I have.
So we're honored to have his input tonight, and we're looking forward to it. And I think there's some decent images that you can have a look at this evening.
Some very good ones. Appreciate the introduction. I know many of you from Richmond participate as part of the Nature Photography Collective, and I want to say thanks for being part. I'll show it really quick before I jump in. So the website's Nature Photo Collective. I saw something on there that said Nature Photography Collective. It's actually Nature Photo Collective. And we have infield workshops, online classes, a huge, we have over 200 speakers that have spoken on a wide variety of topics within there. Live classes, live series, infield workshops, like I mentioned, we're doing a bunch more in 2027. So would certainly love to see some of you out there in the field if you make the decision. Right now, they're all within the West and the Southwest. We're not currently doing anything else outside of there, but we are going to start to branch into some stuff out on the East coming up, which is great. So let me go through a couple things real quick. I know we don't have a lot of time with this many great images, but I do want to talk real quick, which I think will make the evaluation a little more applicable. So, okay. So I do want to talk about one thing real quick, and that's 7 visual design principles in nature. And these apply to a lot of what we're going to look at tonight, and in particular, a lot of the stuff with patterns. So this isn't a presentation tonight. This isn't a lecture or anything else, but I do think some of the stuff I'll talk about, in particular, the third slide, second and third slide might be applicable things. So when we talk about visual design within nature, we're talking about 7 main things: visual relationships, so how things interact with each other. We're talking about repetitions and patterns, which is definitely the theme of what we're going through, at least in half of the images I saw. We're talking about image structure, so how the image comes together, visual hierarchy, and visual hierarchy is extremely important in terms of how we see the image and kind of what we look at in what order. You'll hear me say probably too much. The eye will always go to the brightest part within an image. The eye will always go to the warmest part within an image. I'll talk about that a lot in the reviews. So always think about visual hierarchies, and I'll give some examples of these real quick before we jump in. Balance, does an image feel balanced or is it not balanced? Movement, how is our eye or our brain moving as we look at an image? Is there things we should consider or do a little differently? And then contrast, and how are we going to demonstrate contrast and bring some life back within the image? So these 7 design principles, I won't spend a lot of time on those. I can send you guys a copy of this deck that you can look at later and have for reference. Just somebody, if you want to email me, the organizers have it. So relationships, how do elements within the image work together? Be thinking about that. Do I have intersections or overlaps? Sorry, the dog is going crazy right now. Sorry about that. Do I have intersections and overlaps that take away from what I'm trying to convey within the image? What am I trying to convey also within there? Repetitions and patterns. How are the elements of interest repeated within the image? So we'll talk about this. Are there visual similarities such as color, shape, contrast? Jen, can you, sorry. Quincy. Sorry about that. So structure, what is the image standing on? Where's the viewer going to start looking at in your image? I haven't had that interruption before. Sorry, I'll be right back. Quincy. Sorry about that. Those of you that have dogs sometimes know our neighbor came over to drop off some bread, and he wants to let everybody know. Sorry about that. So what is it starting on? What is the viewer going to start looking at within your image? We'll talk about this. How are we bringing order to an otherwise chaotic scene? So we sometimes will find scenes that are very chaotic and they have no order within there. And visual hierarchy is, I guess, the 4th principle. What elements in the image are the most important? Are the elements all of equal importance? So we'll sometimes talk about when we have multiple patterns, are there particular elements that are more important than another part? Does the image feel balanced? We'll talk about this both in visual hierarchy, but also in balance itself, which is this. How do the elements interact with each other? So thinking about the visual flow, the hierarchy, all these things that make an image feel balanced or unbalanced. Does it bring about ease or does it bring about tension? And each one of those things will may want to communicate something different based on our decisions. Does the area feel too heavy, too dark, too light? And how does that attract the eye? And then that takes us into the 6th, which is movement. Are you using visual cues to create interaction or movement in your images? Visual cues can be compositional principles. Visual cues can be contrast principles. Visual cues can be things related to lights to darks, warms to cools, hierarchies of colors, all these different things that are going to create some of that movement within the image. So lines, natural features, contrasts. How do you read your image? We're going to talk about this in a couple images when we pull them up as well. And then the final thing is contrast. What are the differences within our scenes? What do we want to see? So the contrast, brights to darks, soft to textured, warms to cools, near to far. These are all things that are going to bring about a lot of these elements of these 7 kind of visual design principles, which we just talked about. So that primer, I think, will help us as we go through the image review tonight. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time, but I did think that was important to talk through. All right. So assuming everything's been done correctly. So first and foremost, I'm going to switch video cameras. FaceTime. All right, switching cameras so I don't have anything in the way. All right. So I want to start with the reasons I'm here tonight. And one of the reasons I'm here is the quality of your guys' images. And I don't say this I literally don't say this to everybody. But just wanting to put those up for you real quick, kind of in a thumbnail of the entire group. Zoom out just a hair. So it's not going to be the best, but if we go into the lights out portion of it, you can get a sense of just the beauty of the images you guys have selected and put together. And I have to say, of a lot of the clubs I've worked with over the years, the quality here is quite dramatic and quite striking. I do not see very many images that just flat out don't belong, or people don't know what they're trying to accomplish or anything else. So well done in that regard. As a whole, great images with definitely some oohs and some ahs that came out. So, all right. So let me get started here. All right, gonna move this up now, out of the way.
Okay, so you've changed the order a little bit.
What do you want the order to be in?
Well, I have them in the alphabetical order.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So file
which
name
would
is
be
what you
all
have?
lined up would be the first one.
Okay,
There you
perfect.
go.
Yeah, I can. That sort name was just capture time. This is good. So, okay.
Okay.
So all lined up here. Definitely not your typical scene of what we're trying to get out there or seeing. I really appreciate the variety of what's going on. So the question I would have, or I would look at an image like this one, would be, where do you want me to look? Because right now, my eye is kind of going back towards the back portion of the image. I think potentially a little more than you might want. I'm thinking part of where you really want me focused on is definitely on the zebras, as David Attenborough would say, or the zebras, as most of us would say. And to accomplish that, assuming it cooperates, I would consider a pretty strong crop as part of the image to really bring you into the lines and the repetitions within potentially the zebras themselves. I don't think that this image actually benefits by having the grand landscape portion necessarily, but that's just a personal preference depending on what you're trying to communicate. Partly because what's back behind here doesn't look as interesting as the zebras in the foreground. So that'd be my consideration on an image like this.
And that was Ted Jakarta. The next one is Ancient Roof.
Yeah. Okay. So Ancient Roof, fun picture. A lot of inquiries into an image like this in terms of the visual inquiries. How do you read an image like this is an interesting thing to consider. So what is going to pop, what we're going to see is going to probably be, or most of you are going to see those orange tiles are going to pop because that's the longest spectrum wavelength light that's out there. It's easiest to notice and within there. So that's something to be considered or look at as you look at the image. The other part of it that I would say is making sure, and I think they might have darkened the right a little bit. So if we have these strong orange tiles on the edges of the image, sometimes those can be things that draw your eye out of the image versus kind of keeping it centrally focused. So in a scene like this, one of the big challenges you're going to have, which I think this individual did a good job of, is where exactly to crop the image, because it's going to be a big challenge. Am I cropping it here? What are the intersecting lines? How do I make it feel level to a degree? Because of the distortion that most of our lenses will capture, it won't feel completely straight. So you got to find a little bit of that balance. One thing to consider, a tool that I do use sometimes is under the transform. So rather than focusing on crop, you can focus on the transform and kind of stretching things a little bit just within Lightroom to get a little bit more of the level side within there. So if you find something that's a little bit, feeling like the right side or the left side needs a little bit of adjustment in terms of the thing, this is a tool you can use. But as a whole, I like the image. It's appealing.
It was Harold Lana. The next one is Beryl Staves.
All right, we're on the right track. Okay, great examples of patterns. We have the light to dark transitions here. Interesting texture lines. You can actually see the delineation. If you shot this in very, very harsh or bright light, you wouldn't even be able to see the stave difference between there. This one I looked at the first time and I thought, it's really interesting in color, but what about in black and white? So rather than going to crop, I might actually go into something like black and white. And when I do black and white conversions, I will click on black and white, but then I'll go over here on the right side and there's these little 4 squares. And if you click on that, then you're going to pull up a bunch more black and white profiles. So you can go through those profiles and kind of go over the tops of each particular one and find one that kind of accentuates either the textures within there better or some other element that kind of really brings out. So like this black and white 9, you see a lot more of those whites. And I'm not saying this is the right or wrong answer. You see a little more of those whites and a lot more of the texture within the blacks and some of those darker things. Right or wrong answer, I don't know. It's a great image in color. It just reads a little bit differently in black and white as well.
That was Kemp Davis. And the next one is Basilica of Our Lady of the Angels.
Perfect. I got the spinning wheel of Lightroom Knockout. Okay. So let's take a look at this image. A couple things, technically speaking, well exposed. Probably an HDR, I'm guessing, or some element of somebody that really understands their histogram. You oftentimes will struggle to capture an image like this in an area that you don't blow out the sky, but you still have enough detail to bring back your shadow. So I want to commend you on that. I love the cropping. You did a good job thinking about cropping. When we look at an image like this, what the eye is going to do is compare the right to the left, and it's going to compare elements to find similarities and differences. And this is going to happen really quickly. It's kind of like the games of find stuff. So the more balanced an image is, the less confusing it's going to feel. So this image has an element of balance. I mean, the only thing I'm kind of seeing is this kind of top right portion of stuff up here, which doesn't exist on the top left. So maybe that's an element of, oh, I found something that's different. But everything else feels really balanced, which makes me want to spend more time. If you look at a scene or a situation with bad architecture, you'll find yourself turning away from the image much quicker. So good architecture, good capturing, good cropping is going to keep things in there a lot longer.
That was Susan Kennedy. Next is Bridge Walk.
Okay. So this is these images are always a little bit of a challenge in a couple regards. This is that near to far transition that exists within an image. So the challenge is what height to be at. So if you're really down low, you're going to lose that atmospheric distortion that shows the distance. If you're up too high, you're not going to see kind of the leading lines that lead you back within there. I would say it's an interesting choice to have a person within there, potentially. So technically, the image is really beautifully composed. If you look at the cropping, it's really nicely balanced. I would also be curious if this individual is part of your group, or even if they're not, to wait to see when that person gets all the way down or is further out in the end to bring even a little bit more smaller scale within there. If it was a staged image or somebody that's in your group and you're taking it, I would have encouraged the person to take one step to their left. Then you would have kept equal space around the person to be able to, for your eye to move deeper down there within the image. But I commend you on the comp that you put forth and also the cropping.
Carol Hageman. The next one is Bronze Flourish.
Yes. So this one is interesting for a couple reasons. One, when I zoom in a little bit, I lose a little bit of, if you look at the thumbnail, it's very sharp. When I zoom in on this image a little bit, I lose a little bit of sharpness, which I don't know if it's related to the actual sharpening of the image or if it's just related to the image size that was uploaded here. So I can't comment necessarily on that one. That being said, once again, good presentation on the crop. I like the difference of the particular like buttons, I guess you could say, or the dots or the circles. They bring some interesting line shapes, some interesting textures. I would consider, even though I like the crop, probably cropping out this bottom right to where it just has the single one, because I found that element a little distracting versus these feeling more uniform and kind of all the way through. It doesn't necessarily change the image dramatically in any regard, but just something to consider.
Cindy Walker. Collections in a Puerto Rican villa.
The repetition of this one is a lot of fun. The investigation I kind of saw within this image was really cool. The only comment I had on this image that was the sky up here. And it's just personal preference. I think the individual did a fairly good job of making sure that the sky wasn't brighter than the colors that are down here and kind of de-emphasizing. That was a good choice, whether it was intentional or not. I could say it was a good choice to not have a brighter sky. So these areas where if you got into cropping the image, you would lose some of that visual detail that you want to preserve. If you have an element you just can't crop out or you can't get rid of per se, just make sure to de-emphasize it. So pull some saturation out of it, make it a little less bright, maybe darken it, some element of it, and you'll be able to work your way through and see it.
Mike Ornoff. The next is Ebb Tide.
Yes. Great example here. I like the flow back out into the distance. And unlike, you guys are probably like, well, wait a second. You said you didn't like sky in the other image, but you want to hear the sky here really brings that diminishing perspective in much clearer. And even though it's a teeny tiny sky, it puts the emphasis, like we talked about in terms of the visual hierarchy or even the structure, into play. You want the main focus element to be on those cracks, or in this case, the ebb tide flow, water flows, to be the prominent part of the image, and not have it much focused on the sky. Keeping the sky for me works in this image. It also keeps a nice color balance and kind of those gradation steps out within the image.
John Schickler. Next is Emu Feathers.
Yes. So this was one I paused for a second. I mean, the title gave it away, but if you didn't have the title in there, it would read or look a little differently. This is also an image that when I looked at, let me do something real quick.
Nick, can you zoom in just a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to do something after. Yep, I'm happy to, but I just want to. So this is one that I'm going to make a virtual copy of real quick. So when I looked at this image too, and this is something I'll do in a lot of my images, is do I want to flip it to take a look at that, or do I want to also rotate the image? In this case, it's going to start to read differently in different ways. And the reason I'm saying rotate it potentially is if we compare the two images. So now I got the two images up here. They read completely differently. So when we talk about or we think about movement, well, my opinion, the image on the right is projecting upward movement, and the one image on the left is projecting more downward movement. And so that can be an interesting element oftentimes when we look at our images, is what kind of movement do we want to portray, especially in such an abstract or interesting scene like this one. The same thing goes towards if we even want it to be a vertical orientation versus a horizontal orientation. And I will play around a lot with abstract or pattern scenes to find the orientation I like. So I'll flip and rotate these kind of scenes quite frequently to see what is the most pleasing to my eye or what I look at. Artist choice, artist preference, just taking a look at it. But like the scene, well captured, not overexposed, not underexposed in terms of processing. So thank you for sharing nice work.
Gene Boyd. Face in Window.
Face in window. All right. Like that one. Okay. So my only critique on this image is I'm not afraid of the 1 to 3 or, even more Vertorama orientation. Vertorama images, for those of you that sell work, actually sell quite well for me because all of us have some space within our house that could benefit from a really tall, narrow picture. So people often like it. But the one thing I would do to consider on that is I would try to, once again, personal preference, probably would have the cropping be almost completely identical on both sides to feel that element of the balance. And so if we look at the original, it just feels a little unbalanced to me to have the left side be more than the right side. And I think in an image like this, you actually could have them be a balance and work. The other thing I want to commend is I talk about visual room within images. I want to be able to go all the way around within an image, which you have here. You've created just enough space for the eye to transition and kind of move all the way around the image versus if you had something, of course, Zoom wants to put everything right in my way, had something like this, well, it feels and reads a little bit differently because you can't see the top. You can't kind of work your way around. So it's going to feel a little blocked and has the potential to go back out. So anytime we can be in a situation where we can leave just a little bit of space around our image, our eye is going to be able to move around it more uniformly.
Dave Johnson. Fencing fluidity.
Fencing fluidity. Jeez, somebody got their encyclopedia or their thesaurus. That's fantastic. I love it. Great image. Once again, this one is a lot of fun to be able to look at it and like, am I looking at what am I looking at? Am I looking at a reflection in these actual, rectangles here? Am I looking through something to a reflection, or am I being framed or whatever else? And this becomes a really interesting example or kind of a visual experiment. So I like the fact that it looks the way it does. And I'm not even completely sure what the effect is that's going on there. It's kind of interesting too, because you can see the distortion within the images. So they're not uniform in how they go across, which makes the image more interesting to me than if it was looking through a fence and everything was completely uniform behind. Yeah, you got a frame within a frame, but the fact it kind of has that fluidity as described adds to the image.
Bruce Yoder. Foot
Bruce.
power.
Oh, Bruce. Nice, Bruce. Foot power. All right. Okay, so this one's another great example of repetitions or patterns. And one of the rules, it's actually a compositional principle, is called the rule of odds. And the reason that I think the rule of odds exists is if something is in 2s or 4s, it's much easier for our eye to compare and bucket them out and then move on. So if we're in 2s or 4s, it's going to look at something and say, oh, the 3 on the right are different than the one on the left. We're going to move on. So I typically, if I'm doing repetition stuff like this or whatever, I will do 3s or 5s on stuff. And the reason I think 3s or 5s work better, there's better balance in terms of the individual legs in this case, but the individuals in terms of feeling that element of like a teeter-totter. There's a center point and there's something on each side. It feels a little more balanced. And the other thing that will happen is you'll compare the first one to the second one, but then as you compare, then you're going to need to compare the first one to the third one. Then you're going to compare the third one to the second one. And then you're going to play this game kind of back and forth. And once again, you're going to be engaged in that image for a much longer period of time.
Fury Gottlieb. Geometric intersection.
Yes. So this is another one I spent some time looking at. Great titles. I love the titles. And I just appreciate the effort that goes into thinking about an image and what is it beyond what it is in the abstract perspective. Oh, cool, wood against glass would not be as interesting as geometric intersection. So I can have a big appreciation for that, of how that looks or how that brings. So a couple things on this image that I wasn't sure worked or didn't work, and I didn't have the answer, and I didn't need to have the answer. Just a creativity point would be, one is, if you shot this with a polarizer, what would it do to the image? Because if you shot with a polarizer, you have the potential to get rid of some of that reflection. And does that become more distracting or less distracting or take away from what you want? Just a kind of like basic question to consider and to try within the field. Not the right or wrong answer. The other thing that can be good or bad is the bright white behind there. So the bright white behind there is really interesting because it helps the whole entire geometry stand out better. but it also can become a little bit visually distracting. It works in this case for me because you can clearly see that center area kind of right through here really, really well. And that really brings about a lot of strength within the image.
Nick,
Jay Denny.
Nick, have you tried the reflection removal
I
in
haven't.
Lightroom? Go to the
No,
remove
I have
tool,
not. I'd be kind of curious to see.
one more
Okay,
over,
it's not of that one. So let's talk about reflections.
and reflections, just apply.
Wait for it. My computer's starting to get a little tired these days. I think it's been way too much Lightroom over the years. So my laptop found it faster than my desktop, which is the really, it's not that complicated of an image, Lightroom. It's been 5 seconds for 20 seconds. All right. Well, I don't want to spend all the time there. Maybe we'll have time to come back to it. But yeah, it'd be interesting to even try it in that regard, which is, as a whole, like the image.
Geometric reference.
Oh, who was the geometric intersection?
That was Jay Denny.
Okay, cool. Well, gosh, you guys must be just competing for the best names. Geometric reference. Really great. Okay. I look at this image and I see a lot of the balance. And once again, we got the blue on one side and then the black kind of darker part on the left. So it reads a little differently for me. My eye goes deeper in on the left side. The other part of the left side is we got white here and then we got the black, and it looks like there's some potential for darkening. I would probably correct some element of that to be all black. I don't have a problem with the blue or the bluish purple on this side and the kind of black. The issue I have, this is a nitpick at this stage, but you guys are that good, I can nitpick a little, would be the fact that it's black and white there, and that white goes against some of the other balance that's within the image. So you can correct it a couple different ways. This, once again, would be a fun image to try different rotations. I was also curious, which I didn't take the time before we got in here, to see what it would look like in some of the black and whites, because then you really wouldn't be influenced as much by the color, which may or may not be a good thing. You may want to keep that color, but all the different colors and tonality are going to show up just differently and really highlight the geometrics a little differently within the image. So like when you take the color away, you really focus on the form and the function even more versus versus this one here. You're going to see a lot more of the colors, but you're going to see less of the geometry. So food for thought, like the image.
Martin Evans. Giants Causeway.
All right. So where do we start on an image like this one? Because I know it's not easy to photograph because we have very, very dark and we have very, very light, and we got the contrast of the sea and some of the other stuff within there. So this one's also one that you have to think a little bit about the showcase portion of it and what you want to showcase. So for me, I would go about an image like this one, and I probably would flip it first of all, and think about the flow. So now my eye is going to start on the white up on the top left, and it's going to kind of flow down into the image just a little bit differently than if it's facing the other way. And the reason I would say to potentially do that is we typically like to read images. I'm going to duplicate this one so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So we have the two of them together. Well, you can also do a diptych or a triptych, obviously, when you flip things like this to check symmetry. We read images from left to right. Typically that's the way we've been taught to read. I also think there's an element of how we remember things or think about things that goes into how we're recalling. So if we're thinking about the past, we're looking up and to the left. If we're thinking about the future, we're usually looking to the right. And so that's an element of where we're going within there. So just something to consider. in terms of how I would potentially approach an image like this one. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to be like, well, the Giants Causeway is actually the other direction, blah, blah, blah. It's like you're missing the point if that's where you're focused on within an image. But the flipped one or the regular one, I'm not sure what to do with the water down here on the right. I'm afraid if we crop it, we lose some of the balance, but it's definitely a little bit of a distracting element down here on the right. And then the thing I would say up on the top left, this is definitely something I would take a closer look at, either at your histogram in capture or even your raw file, because this is a little clipped. Oh, computer's jumping around. This is definitely clipped up here, so we've lost some of that detail that we'd want to try to preserve if we can.
Terry Troxel, Golden Dunes.
Oh, that is just lovely. Fantastic. Okay, so now I'm nitpicking. A, it's a beautiful image. B, I can't tell if this is sensor dust or sand dune dust or just things, but I definitely would clean up. This is definitely brushes. I can't tell if this is a sand dust fired or whatever else. But I definitely would clean up, remove all of these little dark patches within the image, because it's such a beautiful form and function, and the flow within this image is just beautiful. I like the matte choice as well. I'm not usually a person that likes mattes. I've seen some of you do it, some of you not do it. There's no right or wrong answer. But the fact you chose a different color matte to kind of match the sand dune image is great. So beautiful time of day to capture this, to really bring that flowing. This could definitely be entered in a curves contest. This could be entered, which I can't remember who said was coming up. Contrast, those lights to darks within the image, the dark parts in the front and the lighter parts in the back. So beautiful. Well done.
Evstasios Spinos,
Nice.
Heavenly Axis.
Little bit of Bodhi, I think, here. Love it. Well positioned, well executed on all the fronts. Good, interesting choice to put in under, I guess we're dealing with patterns, the star patterns within there, the trails. I can't see anything I would change about this image. I know what can go into these images, how much time it takes. Good job getting the really nice orientation kind of with the church steeple or the old steeple pointing directly into that center part. The temptation would be to get closer, kind of have it emerging, but I think by being further back and preserving that leading line of the I guess it's a pathway of some sort, it kind of brings a little bit of stability and structure to the bottom of the image.
And Fulcher, Inner Colonnade.
Good choice, black and white. I love the contrast lines. This is definitely one of those images I'm guessing the individual went out not to photograph this scene, but was watching their environment as they were out there to respond to some element. And this would definitely be the kind of image that you should know what you were responding to when you took the camera out of your bag or put it up to your eye. And I'm guessing you liked the patterns, but then the light dark transitions is the way the light was coming through there were the things that really drew you in, because those are the things that really drew me in. Compositionally, I don't know if I would change anything. The only potential thing I would suggest within the field is maybe stepping back into the left just a hair, because if you did that, you would probably eliminate this kind of window portion back here, which could potentially be a little distracting. Not something I would really focus on eliminating in post, maybe making it a little darker. But if you in the field, if you can remember, which we don't always do, you probably could have gotten this very similar composition by just stepping back one step and moving to your left, and you would have used this wall to kind of block that and still gotten everything else.
Venkat Santosh, Intersection of Light.
Well labeled again. I like that. Great pattern choices. Great. I like you don't notice at first the little lights within the top portion of the canopy here, but you start to examine those at a later point in time. Probably minor things, because we can spend a little time on, my mouse is just jumpy some days. We can spend a little time on the minor things. probably over here on the left side where we have one of the little lights there. I probably would just clean that up. I wouldn't necessarily recrop, but I can see one thing right there. The symmetry works in all the other ways. You got kind of symmetry here. And then the top portion comes together. I'm curious what this looks like flipped. You flip it vertically. Reads differently. Feels too weighty on the top. Like you don't want the weight at the top. You want that weight on the bottom. If you have that the top heavy feels a little more unsettling. So it was definitely the right choice to have that one bottom.
That was Jane Webb. Kaleidoscope of Faith.
Fantastic title again. So let's take a look at this one. What are we drawn to? Well, we have the repetition. Beautiful lines within there.
I'm watching Camera Club of Richmond.
And the only change I would make would be up here, top left. Does not match the right over here. Not a big deal, but this little teeny tiny border thing is just too good of an image to not just move it in ever so slightly and get rid of that. Because we want to keep the eye within that image as best we can. We don't necessarily need these to completely match these over here. You might want to play around just a hair more with cropping. Doesn't make a difference, but that element of just getting rid of that little bit of window on an image that's already pretty much perfect, just take it that last step and make it that way.
Heidi Nunley. Liquid Mosaic.
Very nice. Very interesting. I was kind of curious about 1/3200th of a second. I wasn't sure when I looked at this one in like regular view. I was like, what kind of exposure are we playing with to get this effect? Because sometimes we need a longer exposure and other times we need a much shorter exposure. So very quick exposure to be able to capture that, which probably, I'm guessing, was a completely not visible to the naked eye in terms of how it was presented. So when we can freeze motion that fast, oftentimes we'll do that. The one thing I would consider on an image like this one would be white balance. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, and I'm also processing a JPEG, but how does it feel if we cool it off or warm it up? And this on your raw could have a big impact potentially on your image. As we make it a little cooler, it just reads a lot differently. And I'm not saying I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but I would play around quite a bit in an image like this one with my white balance. And I would also consider if there's any artistic choices I want to make in terms of desaturating particular colors that I want to emphasize, because it's really interesting and it's really beautiful, but something about it, I want to see more color separation and delineation. And if we do that through white balance, you can get a little more. So
Carol Annis. Mosaic of Glass.
okay. So this image, I'm not sure what to say completely. It feels just a hair off. Like it feels a little fuzzy to me. And it might be an older JPEG. It might be any number of other things. That's not necessarily, or it could just be an artistic choice within there. It also, trying to think of, I like the landscape orientation as much as I would like the portrait orientation. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but I would definitely play around with those ones. I think where I stand on this image is I just don't know where to look. You know, we look back at a couple of the other images like this one here. I have a really strong focal point that I can go to, or even this one here, a strong focal point of the chandelier, or strong focal point here. And I'm not sure where I look at this one if I have that strong focal point to go to. Or if I need to, but that's just my observations.
Tony Johnson. Neon pillars.
Well, I'm curious if this one was photographed. We have these. If you ever make it out to California, where I currently still am, I'm not up to BC yet for another 2 months, full time. But we have this thing called Sensorio out here. It's this incredible light field that they designed, and it was super cool. So this one, this is a perfect illustration of if you kind of close your eyes and then look back up, your eye is going to go right to this spot. That really bright one out there, all the way in the distance. And what that does is bring so much dimensionality and depth to the image. So the color band, the Roy G. Biv, that's the wavelength light. That's how we see. So reds, orange, yellows, we're going to see those wavelengths faster than we're going to see any of the other stuff. If this was a blue particular column or pillar back there, it would have a different feel than being yellow. It's going to grab your eye much quicker and bring about a little more depth in my mind. So like it, like the cropping, good stuff.
Linda Mickelson. Oh, what a ceiling.
Nicely thought of. As I said, good cropping. Once again, a little bit more on the top than we have on the bottom. Not a deal killer. Great capture in terms of preserving highlights while still having enough shadows there. I was going to guess high ISO 1600, 1/250th. So good exposure on that. So well captured, well planned, well processed.
Chachier. Organic orbits.
Great title again. Love this one. This image was, if I'm being honest, I like them all. Like you all equally. You're like grandchildren. I have to like you all equally. But this one really drew me. Is it an eye I'm looking at? Is it what kind of,
zooming in again?
that
Sorry.
fascination I have with wood? And I spend a lot of time with wood thinking about texture. So running, what would it feel like if I ran my hand over it? What does it feel like to touch this? Is it smooth? Is it weathered? What caused that to particularly pop out? What kind of wood
Do you mind
species is it?
zooming
Like,
in? Can you
Yeah,
zoom
sure.
in for us? Thank you.
yeah, sorry, there we go. All these different kind of discussions, or as I look at the image, black and white as well. I don't know what this image would have looked like in color, but I like the black and white choice. I have one particular image of a foxtail pine that I photographed one morning pre-sunrise light that I've processed and sold a dozen different ways, and each time it's something a little different. The other thing I like about this image is the uniformity of it. It feels very high key in terms of the processing, but it doesn't have dark blotches or off-putting things that can sometimes exist. So the cropping choice that was made, the processing choices were all really well thought out. So very cool.
Kurt Engelman. Pattern overload.
Yeah, you just described my time in the Middle East. Pattern overload for sure. Love everything about this image. Great processing. You didn't oversaturate any colors. You kept things in place. These images are overwhelming to try to compose within the field, because you're trying to think now, how do I want to get this here? And how do I want to show this depth? And what focal length should I be using to be able to capture and get image compression and all the other things? And I personally wouldn't change a thing on this image in terms of the capture, the orientation, everything that happened. So this is another one that wouldn't look good in a landscape image, in my opinion. Looks absolutely perfect as a portrait. So nicely done.
Eric Franks. Pattern perfect.
Yeah. Well done. Well done to be able to capture that beautifully elusive dragonfly and get the wings. I mean, you may or may not be able to see this on the zoom, but look at the texture that was captured within the wings themselves. You can see like the scales that are kind of existing within there. So I'd be hard pressed to say anything other than well done. Just love it. Probably shouldn't show this to my wife. She'll probably make me buy it from you. or antagonize me for never getting one this nice.
Parks Roundtree.
Nice job, Parks.
Pattern perspective.
Once again, where am I? What am I looking at? What world am I in to be able to see this kind of place? One thing I would consider love the image. Once again, I'll nitpick on teeny tiny things with you guys because you're really great and you know I like the image and don't take anything personally. These are all considerations, not like your image is wrong. Is like playing around a hair with aspect ratio on this image would be kind of interesting to kind of see. So if we make it just a hair more vertical, we need to crop in a little bit more. Does that change anything within the image? And the only reason I'm saying that is the only thing I don't love about this image is the bright white on the right and the skyscrapers out in the distance. And I find these people a little bit distracting down here. So this element over here, I'm not crazy about, but I also don't know if I'd want to crop it too much. And so sometimes when you play around with some of your scale and aspect ratios, you can get by with getting rid of things without having to significantly crop your image or do something else. But fun. This is why we photograph.
Marianne Barnhart. Patterned silence.
Patterned silence. Good thing as well. Okay, so what I'm seeing on this image is ISO 10,000 is going to create a lot of noise artifacting, which I'm seeing in this image. Doesn't matter as much because this image is not about sharpness. It's literally about the patterns and it's about the colors within there. So if you're looking at this from a technical perspective, I would say, well, it's too blurry. But if I'm looking at it from an abstract perspective or just simply what it evokes and looking at it, it's just really fantastic. The heart-shaped portions of the feathers over here are really great. And this is one that doesn't matter as much, purely based on what am I looking at, what am I seeing. So regardless if they're artistic choices or Bob Ross would say happy accidents, it's a great image.
Jerry Postno. Pick a seat, not your nose.
Lots of fun. All right, you guys have probably heard me enough say tonight, don't like the borders kind of stuff. This little portion down here is just the only thing that bothers me, I would say, is figuring out whether we want to kind of prospect or, rotate that out aspect wise. No, sorry, we're going to do that through scale maybe. Or crop it or do something else because of the repetition that exists in the rest of the image. Actually, we might want to crop this one. I'm just going to check out the crop real quick. It's hard. And that's part of the issues. It's hard to figure out the right crop. Well, I don't know if that's the answer. It's just the only thing that's kind of like, what's the one thing I don't like about it? But I really like the lighting and a good job processing this image to not. The temptation would be, well, it's too dark over here. I need to open up my shadows and make it uniform, take down my highlights or whatever else. And it just doesn't work for me in this image. It works because the bright portion within the center part of the image really draws me in. I'm really drawn into that. So I like the processing. I like the choice. And I like the title.
Karen Davis.
Oh, and it's
Right. Radio repetition.
Fun. Takes me definitely down in right away and looking at it. Composition balance is very interesting. It feels a tad bright. And I'm not sure if the answer is to take it a little less. But what we gain there is, if you can see when I take the exposure down, you can now see some of the details of the veins a little clearer. of within the flower itself, which is kind of a little bit interesting, I think. And this just feels just a little bit too bright. So once again, a little bit of a nitpick, something to consider, but this definitely feels a little bright when I look at it. So I would take, this is a JPEG, but if you took your raw, just took your exposure down, your highlights down, maybe even your blacks down a little bit, it brings out more of the contrast within the image and shows those layers just a little bit more. But just a thought.
Pat Davis, Rockwave is next.
So I don't know why when I looked at this image, I wanted ice cream. Maybe that's just I think it's soft swirl or something else. But we're actually teaching a class on Saturday. Murray Livingston, he's part of my team. He's over in Scotland. He's teaching a class on ICM. And this is just great. I mean, I don't know where exactly it is besides the desert Southwest, and what technique was used or everything else, but it's just great. And everything else. The only thing I would consider is feels just slightly off balance, like it's a little unweighted versus if we adjust the angle, nothing other than the angle. Well, now we're getting more. I'm gonna virtual copy this so you can see what I'm talking about. So if we just the angle of it, and this one I need to reset. So if we adjust the, oh, I didn't adjust the angle. I didn't adjust the angle. All right, we did adjust the angle. It just brings you in more, and feels like more of a wave functionality versus, why was it not resetting my crop? Oh, it did reset my crop. Sorry. If you look at the two, I just find myself immersed in there versus that exit point on the left, just ever so slightly. So just something to consider. I find myself really brought in. I also would process this one in black and white, because of the texture and tonality you have within there. It'd be kind of interesting. I have one image I call Sand Wave, and it's just a fun image to look at on a regular basis. So I like rock waves too. Oops.
Ed Hageman.
Nice
Next
job.
one is Scrap.
Scrap. This one just looks like it's destined to go on the wall in somebody's house behind the couch or in an industrial office or something. Excellent black and white treatment of this image. Just so much to look at. It's really fun. Feels like fingers in some areas that are coming out. Other areas feel like definitive folds. You sometimes look at it and you think, oh, am I looking at rope? And then you realize, no, when you see a side cut section like this, you're looking at wire. You know, what's the story? Is this discarded wire? Where did they find it? There's just a lot of elements to this image. This is why, you know, just another example of the creativity that you guys as photographers have to bring something like this to light and think about how you want to process and present it. I mean, the people that aren't photographers that must have been shaking their head at the person who's taking a picture of scrap metal going like, is this person lost their mind? Yet as photographers, we can just so deeply appreciate an image like this. So thank you for sharing. Really good.
Gary Kornfeld. Sky Interrupted.
There we go. All right. So iPhone triple back camera. The best camera you have is the one that's with you, not the one you just bought off of eBay. Classic example. If it was shot raw, I probably would make a little bit of adjustments to the white balance. A little bit green, a little bit blue. It's not shot raw. It doesn't matter in that perspective. In terms of the image and what it communicates, that title as well, it just resonates with, yeah, the sky is being interrupted within the image and the ripples. I'm guessing this is off some type of a boat. Feels very, you can follow those texture lines kind of going back there within the distance as well. So nicely envisioned or pre-visioned.
Susan Van Manen. Snow Crystal Lattice.
Fun. Those moments. And then you look at an image like this one too, and you start to compare and you start to contrast and you start to think of like, well, why is that one holding a little bit more than this one? And why is it less uniform there? Or what did it take or how long did it stay there? And then I'm also curious if somebody is like, was this actually a pure black fence or did they process it in such a way to keep it? But it has the triangular structures, which bring a lot of strength in images. When we think about mountains, you bring a lot of strength within there. You think of metal as well, like the rigidityness or the cold of it mixed with really soft, poofy snow. So it brings a lot of textural components within there. So I don't know how many times millions of people or billions of people would ever walk by, would never even think twice to see a scene like this. And I'm guessing the person that took this had a lot of fun sizing it up and thinking about it and also processing, because I'm enjoying looking at it.
Michael Orr, squaring up.
Squaring up. We're out on a boat deck here or somewhere. I'm not for sure. So to rope or not to rope, that is the question, right? Do we want that rope line going into the image? Does it add? Does it take away? Does it contrast? What's the verdict? Artistic choice, happy accident, I'm not sure. For me, it works to have it in there. And a couple reasons in regards. One thing we typically want to see is we want to see things like this coming out of the corners of an image. Oftentimes, it'll just make it feel a little bit differently. So you're so close, so close to that corner. I would probably crop it up just a hair more, personal preference. Once again, within there. Only other nitpick I'm seeing is we got just a teeny bit of white up here at the top. You can see it zoomed out of the next plank. I probably would just goose my crop down just a teeny bit so you don't see it. So it kind of feels like it extends out versus having those little teeny things around the border.
Pat Hutchinson, traction.
So am I looking at sand? Am I looking at snow? I don't know. I'm guessing I'm looking at a tractor of some sort. Could be looking at some really oddly walking duck or something. But I like the leading components of it. A little bit of that treatment within there. This is another one I would say feels a little bit bright. By being just a little bit bright, you lose some of those textures. So by taking the exposure down a little bit, you start to see the texture lines more within there. So we could do exposure. We could also potentially, in an image like this, add a little more contrast and then take down highlights a little bit, maybe even add or take away a little bit of blacks. But what I'm wanting to do, whatever treatment I do to the image, is I want to get a little bit more of the texture lines to show and kind of walk back into the image, because without those, if we go back to the original, you just lose just a hair of that texture to be able to follow it all the way through. So minor thing, but I would consider something like that.
Philip Snyder, up or down?
Up or down? Good question. Up or down, left or right. So if I'm following this from the left to right, then I'm going to go up the stairs and kind of loop my way around. If I'm following, or I think of the world in a downward start, well, I'm going to start up the top left and I'm going to go down the stairs and back out. So either way, the fact that the image either originates or terminates at the left side of the image is a good choice. Good exposure capture. There's really nothing you could do in the background, but I don't see anything, exceptionally distracting out there within the distance. Black and white image would work as well in this image because of the contrast of your lights and your darks. So something to consider if you went that direction, but well done.
Linda Schmiel, upward geometry.
Hey, I think I know who this person is. This one's fun though too. So we take a further step back, and now we're going up on a whole nother level, which brings about a whole nother level of depth within the image. You see more of the windows, more of the structural patterns within the windows and the forms there. So it works as well. Nice to have both and have both orientations. So if we put the two of them together, which they may or may not be the same person, I'm not saying, they read differently. So the landscape orientation is going to have more space. This individual put also obviously the mat around the outside. The other one on the right, no mat, is going to have more movement to it. Naturally, just based on being a vertically oriented picture, it's going to have a lot more movement within there.
Michael Bryant.
Not the same person.
Nope.
Same place, though. All right.
Urban Shapes.
Did I get a title? Did I get rid of my own? Let me get my stuff back. What's going on here, Lightroom? All right. Oh, I went into all right. Back in there. Okay, cool. Can't decide if it's coming or going. Really interesting. I stared at it for the longest time, and I was like, is this image? Am I looking at the edge of the building, or am I looking at the building intersecting back within there, which I think is really interesting to look at an image like this and how it's created. We're doing a series in October on street and architecture photography with Angie McGonigal, Beth Belo, and Ian Plant, and then I'm working on my fourth to talk about that. And I'm really interested to sit in on some of those because I know so little about street photography and how to see it or how to think about it. I like this image as well for the strong vertical lines on the building on the right, but then also the opposition of the rectangles compared to the squares and the light compared to the dark. So there's a lot to look at in an image like this that's interesting. So thank you for sharing.
Paul Bickford. Wavelength.
Fun. Wavelength. All right. So what are we trying to communicate in this image? What do we want the emphasis to be on? So we do have a little bit of spray coming in. Is that distracting or adding to the element or bubbles? And I think the answer is we don't really care one way or another. I look at the thumbnail and you can see the lines much clearer than you can on the bigger image. So I sometimes would be tempted. Well, this is actually one I'll show a technique. Not this one. Okay, so come on. So we could do, I would consider on something like this, a radial gradient. Not a radial gradient. I'm trying to do a luminance range. And I would select that dark portion within the image itself and possibly even darken it up just a little bit more. And so by selecting the luminance range, all I'm doing is targeting, and that's too much. Looks too black, too garish. But even just a hair more, and then a little bit down on the shadows, not up, and then a little bit adding to the blacks. I'm probably overkilling it, but for demonstration purposes, you can just see those lines even clearer. And I think that's probably potentially overkill, and you may have had it right the first time. But if you ever get in a situation where you want to target just one particular thing and you don't want to go into Photoshop, I will use the luminance range adjustments quite a bit to target one particular small thing. And I just wanted to show that technique as well.
Patricia Munford. Which way do we go?
Patricia. Hi, Patricia. I know Patricia. All right. Which way do we go? All right. So what are we looking at here? Horseshoe crab? I guess so. Are we originating? Are we terminating? What's going on? A lot of fun. Like the black and white choice as well, because you can see the lines much clearer. And a color image would have the propensity to distract you. And And so the black and white here just really preserves all that stuff within there. So well done. Like the image.
Marta Namek. And that is all of the assigned subjects.
Oh, perfect. Well done as a whole. You all get shiny gold stars in my book. All right. So now we're into general, right?
Yep.
All right. See my.
And the first
all right.
one is Arizona Sunrise.
Okay. So I need to go back to file name. All right. So I'm just going to highlight them real quick. Won't be able to see them all, but we do the lights out. So here's just a snapshot of the work you all bring forward or brought forth in this regard. Unthemed. Probably going to, well, in the interest of time and also everything else, we'll spend a little less time on some of these, not because they're not as equally of quality, but I've shown a lot of techniques and I've talked about a lot of stuff, but I will spend some time. So once again, good example of a lot of strong work. And it's nice to look at your cohorts and see all their work together. So let's start with here. All right. Arizona sunrise. What do I say about this image? Probably not anything. Maybe a little bright on the blue, actually, now that I look at it a little closer. Sunrise, I wouldn't expect a blue sky to be that bright. Whether you want to keep it that way or not is totally up to you, but I'll just show you what I would potentially do. I would go into the saturation. I'd click the little adjusty thing, come over here, and I drag down just a hair and pull out maybe 15, 17 points of saturation out of the sky up there. It'll just kind of help the image feel just a hair more harmonized. Doesn't make that big of a difference, but good job having big balloons and small balloons and kind of just that feeling, I feel like I'm back watching the movie Up or something. So
Jay Denny, Arctic Meltdown.
well, hopefully you're talking about the snow and not somebody on your ship, but so this is a well done image, especially considering or because of the fact, or how do I want to say this? It's a well done image considering it's an iPhone. If I'm being honest, it looks really good. If all cameras are good cameras in terms of what we have. I have some great images on iPhone. You do lose dynamic range and you do lose a little bit of that image compression regardless of iPhone. If you're using an iPhone versus a regular camera, so it's well executed in that regard. As I look at the image, not sure what's going on here. Is that iceberg or a seal? The leading line here kind of does help to lead you in. This is one where I struggle when I go to the Arctic regions as well to communicate the scale of massiveness, but also find interesting potential subjects. And just for illustration purposes, I probably, if you have other images within there, probably would pull it down into the area of the most interesting kind of component within the scene as a whole. And so for me, that's right here. I would look at the image as a whole and find this interesting. A, got some darker bergs. B, I don't know what we're dealing with here, which is kind of interesting. And you're still showing some of the areas, but then bringing you into the most interesting part of the iceberg, which is the bluer portions within there. So that to say, you can definitely keep it as a panoramic orientation and be just fine. But
Susan Van Manen, Autumn's Long Way Home.
oh, Autumn's Long Way Home, lovely, really great. Oh, just that color variation is fantastic. Love it. Okay, so for such a beautiful image that's so well composed, I would take a minute and get out your little eraser tool. Not spend a lot of time on it. You don't need to. Don't need to use generative AI. Don't need to visualize spots. Just simply go in, and it's going to be really crude. I just made it way too big. Not a JPEG, but I just get rid of that blue sign down within there. It doesn't change the essence of the image or anything else within there. Not sure I'd really modify too much more on this image. It's really hard to get the color separation within colors like this. And you have it. I can see some of the yellows. I can see some of the oranges. I can see some of the reds. So I wouldn't worry about the processing in that regard either.
Martin Evans, Avalon Pier.
Hey, that's close to me. All right, so this one's different than our ICM of the wave in the desert area. Very interesting. It's good to have the strong vertical lines. The only thing I would say is this right here, this light. I probably would just I could probably do a better job than the last one. So we can just kind of show. I'd make it pretty narrow and just right down through there. And just get rid of that. I just don't want that distracting element within there, especially when everything else feels so mysterious. That light kind of felt a little bit off-putting, not in a bad way, just different personal preferences, but good orientation in terms of cropping, or excuse me, composition, to not have the pier be center, but to have it kind of be as a guiding line going in on the left side.
Patricia Munford, blocked.
Fun. Hard to critique an image like this one and say, well, you should have done this or should have done that, because I don't even know what should have would have been on that in terms of, is this a multiple exposure? Is it combined in post-processing? Is it, this image or that image? And I don't care, because it's fun and it's interesting and it's artistic and it's creative. So regardless of your intention, regardless of how you got there, congratulations on being creative with your photography and bringing forth something that's very visually compelling to look at as well. It's very appealing to take a look.
Philip Snyder, bad design.
By design. Oh, this looks like we're in Spain right now, Alhambra, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so only thing I would say about this one is it feels a little crooked. So I would straighten up the angle just ever so slightly. Now it feels just a hair better. So that wasn't a big adjustment. We're talking 1 point, but it definitely needed to be squared up just a hair. Otherwise it felt it is actually off angle. So images like this, of the fine details you have, just doing that last little bit. But good job orienting the image, keeping some space around it, and kind of balanced within there.
Eric Franks, Canadian synchronized swim team.
All right, so we look at this image. We got nice reflection. We got almost the same foot things and almost the same tail, which is kind of nice to kind of put that in place. Not overly processed, which is a good choice here. You could see sometimes an image like this being overly processed or not looking realistic. So good. Also like the idea of incorporating what is in your surroundings into your title. So understand what I'm looking at, Canadian geese. Oh, let's make this fun. Synchronized swim team, not goose with ass in air or something else like that. So thinking about it and making it fun also makes it good.
Kemp Davis, drops of blue.
Kemp and I are old friends now. So, oh, fun. Just, I mean, this is the planning to go in and the execution on something like this. I can only imagine. I've never even tried something like this. And, it looks like a mushroom. But the thing that seals the deal for me on this one is the reflection. And you're seeing that underside. So having that, I don't know if I've ever seen an image like that, to tell you the truth. I don't spend a lot of time looking at stuff like this, but you'll see that drop. You see the top portion, but that person will choose an angle where you wouldn't potentially even see that under reflection. And that under reflection adds a lot to the image. So I like it a lot.
Cindy Walker, duality.
Okay. A little bit of that perspective distortion of having the foreground kind of blurred with, I think it's a mail truck going by, and then the sharper portion in the background, because it's usually the opposite thing. We usually want to see in our images, we want to see the thing that's closest to us, the sharpest, and then it can be blurred in the background. So it adds, for me, it adds a little bit of an element of confusion, but it also adds like something that's different and it's intentional. What I hate is, well, not hate, I don't hate anything, but what I don't like is when somebody has an out of focus image that they, are passing forth as something other. It's about making artistic choices. And I think whoever took this image was making an artistic choice. And by making that artistic choice, it doesn't make it right or wrong in any capacity. It just makes it artistic and different and good to look at.
Paul Bickford, far out freeze.
Geez, I don't know who's taking these pictures, but wow. You guys, your ice pictures. Last time I was here, I think you just had a big ice storm. So that's great. Well processed. I don't know if it's focus stacked or single image exposure, but really cool. It was like tentacles kind of reaching down in there, touching each other. It feels like I'm looking at crabs in the top part, but then the bottom part, I can see the reflection of the trees back behind there. Really cool. Really done. Good job keeping space around there. Probably some choices and decisions that had to be made in post-processing to protect certain things. So good job keeping textures and details, not over or under exposing stuff. So cool.
Parks Roundtree, follow the path.
Follow the path. Okay. Cool. Like the green. So green is always a challenging thing to photograph, especially in forest environments, because there can be so many different shades and variations. And the tendency sometimes will be they'll come out saturated even in camera. So we have to make sure we're keeping colors separated. And one way to check that is I'll sometimes go into the saturation selector again, and I'll pull out just a hair of some of the greens and the yellows. And this is a JPEG, so it's not going to look as good. But sometimes I find if I do that, I'm going to make it feel, I'm going to give it some better delineation within there. I don't want to do that much. And when I'm talking about better delineation, what I'm talking about is if it feels very uniform, oftentimes you won't see as much of the detail. And so by pulling some out is something to consider. I would say hopefully maybe in your RAW, or if this is a JPEG, this blown out sky is definitely a little distracting. So whether it's just is what it is, but I would always try to keep the detail, because what happens with a blown out sky like here is you lose that cloud detail, and also the eye goes to the bright spot there. But the idea of seeing the path and the leading lines and leading you up there, photographic instincts are really strong and can be continued to be honed with just small techniques. So keep at it.
Bruce Yoder, following the trail.
Following the trail. Artistic treatment of this image for sure, which is interesting because it's usually you want more color separation and less some of the other things within there. And I'm finding that I like this treatment. It feels very high key, very pleasing, warm and inviting within there. Says follow the trail, but I can say my eye goes first to the sun star, which is really nice up there, and then kind of goes back down within there. Definitely leads me back in with the image, which is great. And I don't personally process images like this, but I like the way this looks. It's just a very inviting image. Well done.
Tony Johnson, fresh catch.
There we go. Getting that one in there. So really great job understanding your focus points and getting those correct in camera, or making the choice in post to blur. I'm suspecting it was probably more of that blurring in post, or maybe some of that. So Only thing I would consider on this image, if you did blur it in post, would be to feather in the blurring kind of around here, and not have it like we have this really sharp contrast of the one particular stake or wood and the bird itself. I would try to have this be just a little bit less blurred to kind of help smooth some of the eye transition within there. But that's just personal preference. But really nice job centering the bird and then also having that leaning the bird on that leading line within there as well.
Pat Davis, get me out of here.
Not an image you'd see every day. Interesting choice. Wow. Look at that capture. To have that ability to capture that image like that in that moment. Please tell me it wasn't a single image you were shooting in burst or something, but wow. It's really interesting. The fact they're both baring their teeth is makes them both feel like human elements. I mean, like gives it a natural element to it, not even a human element, which is interesting. Like the black and white treatment, but just great job being in the right place at the right time and getting the right orientation. They're not looking, well, you can't tell with the horse if it's looking at you, but he's definitely looking directly in your direction, which makes it very engaging within there. Great shot.
Harold Lana, Gladiolus.
Gladiolus. Once again, I'm not as good of a flower photographer as you are, so anything I would say on technique or anything would not be accurate. Blurred background is great, not too off-putting with some of the lights. Oftentimes you can see an image like this and there'll be really bright things within the background. It's okay to have some, but make sure to blur them like you did. The stamen is really strong, but the thing I'm really drawn to is the rimming of the flower, I guess you could call it, or probably a better term. Really kind of keeps me engaged and kind of follows around the texture lines around the outside. It's kind of like a mountain peak. So I appreciate that.
Pat Hutchinson, glorious ladies of wrestling. Gorgeous ladies of wrestling.
Oh, this must have been the wrestling I heard you guys talking a little bit about before you came in. So yeah, that's I don't know if it's definitely not WWF, but it's a lot of fun. So let's talk about this image. So there's just a lot to look at. The wrestler on the left is looking up at the one on the right with a strong look on her face. We have two wrestlers down on the ground. I think we have two wrestlers down on the ground. You can't kind of see. So finding the right orientation is certainly key. Shooting an image like this one too, I don't see the technical settings on it, which is totally fine. But trying to capture that, freeze that moment is definitely paramount. And that person did it because you don't want to see blurry legs. You either want to see really blurry legs and lines to communicate a lot of movement, or you want to freeze that exact moment. And I like that they froze the moment.
Joe Ring, grass dancer.
So the last ones we talked about having the eye contact of the get me out of here or some of the other ones. This was one you don't need it because you're showcasing something different. You're showcasing the form. So good job having that individual. I'm sure you didn't place them there, but capturing it in such a way you could see them distinctly from the background. If they were dancing in a flower garden with yellows and oranges, it would not look as strong as it does against the green trees, but you can see them out there. Minor nitpick, once again, is just that top right. I probably would crop out the top right to keep you focused in there, that bright part. But otherwise, interesting image, storytelling component.
Michael Orr, he may score.
He sure may. Didn't grow up with lacrosse, so I get to kind of pretend I know what it's about. But let's talk about this one. 1/2000th of a second. So good job freezing that action, showing the intent, the movement within there. So I like that element as well versus if you didn't freeze the moment, you can play around obviously with different shutter speeds or whatever. But thinking with the title about what actually is potentially occurring. And then I'm wondering, well, did he score? So thanks for putting that one together.
Bill Whitworth, Liberty Bridge.
Liberty Bridge. All right. I don't even know where Liberty Bridge is, but pretty interesting. So I'm guessing this was shot handheld. If you were on a tripod, I would have reduced your ISO and increased your aperture. But oftentimes we don't always have a tripod. But if you were on if you had a tripod, I would have gone to a longer exposure, increased my aperture to get a little more depth of field, and reduced my ISO. But all things being equal, I love the orientation up, kind of leading you up, because you might, with the brighter parts, kind of follow lines kind of pushing you up to end up at the top individual up there. So well done.
Terry Troxel, Light After Life.
That nice Joshua Tree sunrise. Nicely thought of. Light After Life. So infers you wouldn't necessarily think about it, but the dead Joshua Tree and the live Joshua Tree kind of next to each other, and that rebirth of the morning is interesting. Good processing on the sky as well. It's real easy to clip these early morning skies with the contrast. Also like appreciate the fact you got some green grass out there. You don't always get that, or very seldom get that. So it's a good I like the orientation on the balance as well between the mountain and the Joshua Tree, because it feels balanced. It doesn't feel unbalanced. If you didn't have that mountain back there, it wouldn't quite have as much balance, but it has good balance.
Kurt Engelman, Mating Season.
Somebody knows what's coming. All right. So left-right movement is good. As we all know, as wildlife photographers, or even other wildlife photographers like myself, who are just what I call opportunistic, anytime you can get the animal looking directly at you, it brings more engagement. But we can't always control the direction that animals move. What I do appreciate about this, which is interesting, is the tongue out. I grew up around elk, so I'm familiar with when they have the tongue out, they're usually making more mating calls or whatever else. But by preserving or capturing it with the tongue, it communicates differently of intent than if you didn't have that.
Carol Hageman, Melancholy.
I don't know if this is the same guy that went through before, but geez. Yeah. So artistic processing of this image, I can tell a little bit. I'm going to be honest, just from my perspective, I'm not taking away from the image, but his skin it feels too soft, way too soft to me. And this, and I'm not saying it is, feels like it could be an AI generated image, just purely on the processing up here around his head or whatever. Like, I don't want to see somebody that looks this disheveled. I don't want to see any smooth skin or over noise reduction. So either what F4GOSS, if that's a processing preset or a filter, just kind of look at that. And if you want to keep that effect everywhere else, then I would just mask back in some element of kind of that native capture to bring that ruggedness back. Because I think you have it, but that you may not be able to see it all on the zoom, but it just feels really soft, like it's been over noise reduced or something else has happened up there. And I wouldn't want to see that on a grizzly individual like this.
Evstasios Spinos, Muddy Buddies.
Oh gosh. Yes, they are. Poor mother has to deal with that. Saw triplets one time in Maui that were playing in the sand, and we watched one of them pull out his pants and dump a handful of sand on his front. And we looked at the parents, and they said they just go all in the shower when we get home. So, which is good. So Muddy Buddies. Do we want the juvenile elephant in with the Muddy Buddies, or do we want to see an image of just the Muddy Buddies themselves, the three of them playing around, and maybe there's different crops. But that would be one consideration. It might be a mother or it could be a juvenile. If it's about the 3 elephants playing together, which all are of similar size and energy, I would potentially try to zoom in more and not have the other elephant in there. But it's still kind of fun because it shows like even the adults want to go play in the mud sometimes.
Ted Jerkuda, Nature's Lace.
Mm-hmm. I got one of these up on an iceberg in Alaska last summer. I like it's evenly lit, so you can see the texture behind there. B, a good choice on something that has a darker background. I would question a hair of the fabric choice, just purely because you can still see the detail within the fabric versus what I think you want is the detail just within the leaf itself. So I would consider shooting that on something like a silk or something else that would just be completely uniform back behind and not having any of the texture detail that you have in that type of fabric, because the intricacy of that flower can kind of bring that forth. The other thing I would consider is cropping it in even more. I don't know if you need quite as much space around it, but that would be personal preference.
Jane Webb, No Beach Day.
No, not for sure. Dog is chewing me today. All right, so timeless. This image feels timeless to me. Like I don't know when it is. I don't know when it was. The ones that are out there on the stilts feel like they could collapse at any second, which kind of feels very ominous. Cropping choice is perfect. Just feels, and if this is an area you've been to or know well, I could very much picture this as an image that would resonate quite a bit with you. But when I say timeless, I'm looking around the image and I'm trying to see, like, is there modern vehicles within there? Is there any telltale signs that would tell you what century I'm looking at or what decade I'm looking at? And the answer is no. So having timeless images sometimes can be really unique as well, or make them feel longevity. So I like it.
Linda Schmiel, Old City Hall.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is the constant struggle we have with the landscape. I don't carry around a chainsaw. Hopefully most of you don't, to cut down trees that are in the way. So the thing I would say on this one, good orientation there, but the tree on the top right is, by the fact it's touching the building, is very distracting to me. So a couple things you can do. One is, in a situation like this, just crouch down just a little bit more and you can at least have the tree not touching the structure itself. But what I oftentimes will look with is, if I know I have something like that going in there, is there any way I could get a little bit of a tree on the other side and create a little bit of kind of a shadow moment or feeling like you're in an enclosed space? So that's sometimes what I'll look like within the landscape. Also would say probably could use just a little bit more space around the top steeple area. Feels pretty compressed right there, barely a little move. But I like the detail, good solid capture on everything else.
Dave Johnson, Our Lady of Guadalupe Cathedral.
Yes, see, it's exactly what I'm talking about right here. So now that person is framed, this particular image has been framed by a tree on the left and then a little bit of a tree branch on the right, which then pulls that emphasis into the center part of the image just a little bit more. So if we go back to the other one, you can see we have just on the right, so it doesn't really frame it in. So sometimes you got to step back. And this one is how to use tree framing really, really well to frame a subject. Man, those are some cool looking trees. God, they look like skeletons down below. Really interesting. Love the colors. I'm back there within the distance. Good framing composition. Nothing I would change about that one.
Mike Ornoff, Pollination.
Gosh, you guys have talent. That's just beautiful. Really cool. Really, really cool. So not my genre, so I can't offer like technical advice or anything else. The only thing I am seeing is over here, I'm seeing a little bit of artifacting, which could potentially be from something like topaz. And what I've sometimes found is I'll run it for the area I need to pull noise out or get some sharpness in, and then I'll sometimes mask back in the original part so I don't have that little bit of artifacting. So you can see that artifacting down through here. It makes it look, takes away from some of the beauty and the natural here. Makes it look just a little bit off to me. But as a whole, I mean, the framing is fantastic and good image.
Linda Mickelson, Rocky Mountain Peak.
Rocky Mountain Peak. Looks like Canada for me. So that looks like Peru, actually. There's something a little bit off on the image sharpness with this image. And I don't know if it's an older film scan or just a processing style or whatever else, but I would want to see just a hair more. And I'm really critical on Mountain Peak. Sorry, it's kind of my thing. And I don't know if it looks sharp when you first have it in RAW. I would look at if you're doing any sort of preset sharpening or adjusting your sharpening down here within, where do we have it down here? Transform? No. Detail, sorry. So down here, sometimes you'll see like you've done an import and it's jacked up your details or your radiuses and you're starting not from scratch on this one. So depending on who this is, if you actually have a raw capture of this image, send it to me. I would like to take a look at it and see if there's anything, because from my perspective on mountains, especially with glaciers, I'm always trying to keep every little bit of detail within the crevasses, the breaks in the ice and everything else. And I don't want you to lose that within that image. And maybe it's like, hey, I took this a long time ago, or I took it out of a plane going 300 miles an hour and it's as good as it gets. But that's just something to consider.
Ed Hageman, Ruins of the Santiago Apostle Parish.
Cool. Okay. So just nitpicking a hair on this one. This little thing poking in up here on the top right, I would just quickly get rid of that. Probably would get rid of the pigeons because there's only 2 of them. There's a whole bunch of them. I keep them. And then I would crop in just a hair on the left. So you have like this old feeling structure. Actually, I would crop this thing as a whole. So I'd crop it on the left to get rid of this little Wi-Fi antennas or whatever they are. I crop up from the bottom to get rid of this blue thing down here. Crop in from the right just a hair, A, to show, not to show this distance back here, and B, to get rid of that thing on the right. And so then it feels like a little more like how far do they continue? How far do they go? And then also feels a little more timeless to me by not having a modern thing like a satellite antenna there and or that little thing poking in. So just a small thing. This one would also probably benefit, or could be done in black and not benefit, could be done in black and white, and just you could really play with the contrast to get some of those that interesting water staining to pop and other things within there.
Susan Kennedy, Silent Guardian of the Lake.
Oh, look at you, buddy, hanging out there. Okay. If you're making the artistic choice to have it be blue, that's great. Personally, and I'll show you my technique for setting white balance, which I've showed people before. This feels a little too cool for me, as in too blue. So I will take my vibrance and saturation to 100, which will nuclearize the image. We're not going to be there, but I will look at warming it up a little bit, because what I want is I want warmer snow. And I want things that are getting some type of light to feel warmer. So like the swan, like some of this area here. And this is going to help my eye to see some of the delineations and difference. And it's hard to do on a JPEG, but it's pretty interesting. So I get something kind of maybe closer to that, and then I'll go back in. And so now what I've done is, if you look at a before and an after, is I've created a little bit of color separation, but also made the scene for me feel more realistic to like what you would have expected to see. I don't expect to see really blue clouds and blue things, even though it felt like a cold morning or other things out there. So that's just personal preference. If you're making the artistic choice to go more blue, that's great. But oftentimes we'll get an image like this and it felt cold to us and we think, oh, it should be blue, but yet we can add a little more warmth. I possibly would add just a little bit more as well, and then readjust some of my exposure just to, it feels and reads just a little differently if you do something like that.
Hattie Nunley, Spring Alive.
Good. Just this bottom right thing, probably would just heal that out so I don't have that distracting element. But good job leaving the other space around there. I'm not sure what kind of flower this is, but I like the presentation of it.
John Schickler, Standing Against the Tide.
Ah, this one's kind of fun. Yeah, keeping the house in the background works. We do have some clipping up here and some potential clipping. This is one I would, if you're kind of, I think this one could benefit from a little bit of moodiness as well to kind of show a little bit of drama. So I would take the highlights and the darks down just a hair, and then I potentially would just do a local adjustment up here. And I want to keep people focused down further in the image versus up. So actually potentially I would consider cropping as well. And the rocks are cool, but now I'm keeping the emphasis much more down towards the person and then the house. Like I look at this and I go person, house, waves in between. Is this guy trying to walk home or what's going on?
Carol Annis, State Line, Bristol.
There we go. Hopefully you're not stopping traffic too line like these people I saw in Banff last week who were standing out in the middle of the street taking Instagram videos. It's like, geez, gosh, God. Okay, so this one feels a little bit not straight, so I probably straighten it out. Not that much, just a hair more. Feels a little more uniform there. And then we definitely have clipping going on up here within the sky. So same thing, JPEG, you're not gonna get it, but I just if you take your highlights down, you can see just right away. Now you're seeing some cloud definition within there, much clearer, which is kind of what you want. But the perspective distortion leading out in the distance is kind of fun. And then the leading lines of the yellow are really good too.
Gary Gottlieb, Symbiosis.
Symbiosis. Well titled. Well thought about. Indicates that element of nature living together with humans definitely, and also feels like the trees are the focus, even though the houses are back there within there.
Sorry, Nick,
I would
could you zoom
question
in
a little.
please?
What's that?
Zoom in
Zoom
again.
in on it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thought it
Yeah.
was. I would question whether what does the right portion over here add to the image or take away? And this is one where I would just probably play around with a little bit of a crop. Personal preference once again. And do you want to show the bigger space or do you want to show a more intimate kind of look? So personal, whatever decision you make is fine.
Gary Kornfeld, Tackling.
Look at that nice captured image. I don't think he's succeeding at tackling, by the way. So he's missing the tackle. Well done. I'm not a sports photographer. I do some, like I mentioned, capture from time to time, but focus looks really sharp. You got a little bit of that blurred background. Shows that action, both from the perspective of person missing and then also the running back or quarterback or wide receiver going in that direction. Good movement, good space. When you look at the image, it feels very dimensional as well, which is what you're going for.
Ling Wentworth. Termite throne.
Wow, look at that. What a lucky moment to be out in the world to see that. That's great. Trying to figure out the grass in the foreground. This part is a little distracting. And I also want to see the focus being primarily up on the cheetahs. So I would consider something like this, doing a linear gradient on the bottom portion and darkening it up just a hair and see what it looks like, because I want to take the emphasis away from the foreground and really put it up here. And then the other thing I would do, which I've shown this technique before, is I would do a radial directly on the face of the cheetah, and I brighten it up a little bit, add a little more white, add a little more warmth, and then add a little bit more texture, a little bit more clarity, possibly dehaze just a hair, and then add just a little more sharpness. And then I duplicate the mask, or radial gradient, sorry, and move the other one down. Assuming I can do things correctly anymore. Move the other one down here. And you can see I kind of overdid it on the JPEG, because you can see the actual halo, which you wouldn't want. And then the next thing I would consider is duplicating. We got to go over here. Duplicating and inverting the mask, do one on the opposite side. So now we have one outside, and then I would do the opposite effect. And it's going to look like crap because it's a JPEG. And bring the exposure down on the rest of the scene. Bring the shadows down. Bring the highlights actually up as well. Overdone. Let me actually go back to this one and readjust it. Okay, cool. So you can still see the halos. You wouldn't see those in a raw file. But what it's done is it's put the emphasis, taken the emphasis off anything in the foreground that's not sharp, and really drawn that emphasis towards the head of the cheetahs, which is ultimately where we want people to be focused or looking. So it's a technique I use. It's overdone for the demonstration on the JPEG. You definitely, when you look at the thumbnail over here, you would not want to see any of this haloing, which you wouldn't see on the other one. But that would be some way to approach this, because I would be, and the message is, think about what you want to de-emphasize, to emphasize what you want to see. In that case, would be the cheetahs.
Venkat Santosh. The flip side.
The flip side, way to go. Way to think of creatively. This goes back to that one image I saw earlier of that cool leaf that you could see through. This one doesn't have any texture in the background, so I can really focus on the flower itself. Love the water droplets. Feels a little bit like, some Tina Turner rock band person or something. Or Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy or something else. It just has some personality to it. Love the lighting as well. Well done.
And Fulcher. The held note.
Communicating that moment for sure. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything I could add or whatever else. I don't think there is. If I'm looking just nitpicking, I would say the sequins are just a hair too bright. But you can never have too bright a sequence. But I think there's a little bit of clipping down here within the sequence, which doesn't matter too much. It doesn't take away from the image. But you can see the band behind her, which is great, but they aren't the focus. She's the focus, which is what you want.
Jerry Posner. The vessel.
What the heck am I looking at here? This is crazy. Am I MC Usher now or what? Where in the heck is this place? Wow. Check that image out.
That's New York City.
Wow. That's fantastic. That is super cool. You could just spend forever looking at this image. That's for sure. At least I could. Next time I go to New York, I'll have to check it out. Yeah. So it doesn't feel real, but it does look real by having things in the background and having people within there. And people in different colors are kind of adding to the image as well. Like if you were to go like early in the morning and not have anybody there, I don't think you would have as much strength in this kind of image. Really well oriented. We do have this element here on the bottom left, which I'm guessing there's nothing we could do anything about, which we just need to live with because everything else is so nice. So cool.
Marta Namek, Twilight's Ember.
Oh man, it makes you want to go home, doesn't it? Jeez. A little bit too much red. So if we look at the histogram up here, and I know it's taken with an iPhone and it's probably a JPEG, but the histogram shouldn't have that much red usually popping out that far from the rest of the colors within there. So even a bright sunset would have some red within it. It would be out a little bit more, but this is one of the ones where if we went into the color mixer, I'd pull out just a little bit of the reds and still have that there, and then possibly even a little bit of the luminance. Maybe not. It's hard on the JPEGs to do it, but it just moves that histogram just a little further over, and it doesn't feel quite as bright. Here it feels really bright. Here it has a little less, and you can see some of the tree function within there.
Marianne Barnhart, Vermilion Dollar View.
Yes, been there. Good stuff. Like the orientation of the image, the cropping orientation. This is another one where it doesn't have the sharpness I would expect, unless it's an artistic choice. But I would want to see more of the detail versus kind of that artistic. But if it's making that choice or whatever, great. Live with it, but good cropping, good choice for this kind of image.
Karen Davis, When Your Team Has Your Back.
For sure. That's fun. Yeah. Capturing those moments. I mean, look at the rest of the teams that like nobody's really even cheering for them. Maybe they're already out of the race, or I don't know, or maybe there's only 2 people in the race, but I love it. Just that energy that's getting projected.
Michael Bryant, Yucca.
Good choice, black and white. Love the curls within this. Could have gone into the everything else. Yeah, it's great. Great cropping orientation. We sometimes think about the rule of thirds, which is it's all about balance. Is having it just slightly off balance makes the image work really well. You could potentially have cropped it with that in the center, and it doesn't make it bad. It just doesn't feel as balanced as being a little bit off. So 1/3 off thereabouts is helpful in something like this. So good black and white as well. These are the kind of things that if you sell your work, people will resonate with oftentimes. But that's just an observation.
Gene Boyd, Zebra Crossing.
There we go. I don't know where they're going, what they're doing. I think, and I like the image and the scale within there. I would say to check your focusing. It feels like you don't have the right focus point set within the camera to really capture that sharpness. It feels like the camera is focusing back here versus the focus points being right here, or even over here. So it's something you can usually change in the settings to go to AFC or for continuous focus, or other camera models. You can change it to be able to capture wildlife or other subjects as well a little easier. I speak from experience. I have lots of wildlife photos that didn't have the sharpness in the area I wanted. So
And that's Shashi Air.
nice.
And that's our last one.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. I think we went longer than I didn't know I was going to have 80 some images. So we went longer than I expected. Minus the interruption from the
Nick,
dog.
Am I on? Nick, thank you so much. Good, and you were able to get through a big stack of images in a reasonable time, and for
For
the
sure.
for the artist. And we look forward to having you again. And
Well,
that's your
yeah,
web-
it's like I said, you're the only one. You're the only one. So
we'll check
um,
out your website and see if we can meet you in out west.
yeah, exactly. So or the online stuff. So I'm putting my email in there for anyone that wants to email me as well, just in terms of things, something I said that sparked a thought or any ideas or just in general and stuff if you want to reach out. So feel free at any point in time.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next trip.